Every woman that I've met or every experience I've heard about, really people have found a way to dig deep into that pool of resilience in a way that they did not realize they had capacity to do.
Erica Neubert Campbell is a breast cancer survivor, advocate, and author of the book, The Mastectomy I Always Wanted. Her story is more than cancer. It's about identity. And Erica reminds us that breast cancer doesn't just change the body. It changes how we see ourselves, but it can also become the start of something new, a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to define beauty and strength on your own terms. If you've ever felt like life forced you to start over, this conversation will speak to you. And hey, if you want to hear more stories like Erica's, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Erica, I just want to thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, I am so honored to be here, Holly. Thank you.
You know, so many women hit a point in their lives where everything seems to shift. Their roles, their relationships, even the way that they see themselves. And then the unexpected happens, and it seems to change everything all at once. And for you, it came in the form of a breast cancer diagnosis. Can you take us back to that time and what it was like and how it changed the way you saw yourself?
You know, I had a really interesting backstory from when I was diagnosed. I had been worried about getting breast cancer for nearly 15 years, specifically because I had lost my own mother to breast cancer. And so that fear just stayed in my mind. And I had a series of, obviously preventative mammograms, but I progressively over the years had what I call scary mammograms, meaning I got called back. They had to do additional testing. And so, Holly, when I finally got that phone call, it was a Friday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, and I was alone in my office at work. And the phone rang, and I could tell it was a doctor's office. And I'd been waiting in very, eager anticipation. And the doctor said, didn't really say hello, just said, "Are you sitting down and do you have a pen and paper?" And I knew it then and there, right? You just know that story. So that is that moment when you hear the words, "You have cancer," your world, as you rightly said, just turns upside down and you don't see it coming. Even though, like I said, I sort of suspected that this would come my way eventually, it still was ground shaking and just really took me, off guard for someone who thought I would be prepared.
Yeah, because you had you had knowledge of how these things happen and you had a story to go along with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I had what I call like the vocabulary of cancer, meaning I knew all of the things about breast cancer before I was diagnosed myself, just based on my mother's journey. And I understood the terminology and the words and how scary it could be. So I felt like I had a little bit of a heads up, but that still didn't prepare me as much for what I thought would be my own journey.
Well, I have a copy of the book right here.
Oh,
The Mastectomy I Always Wanted is a great title because you're very curious then. When I saw the book, I'm like, I need to know more about this. And you were very honest in a way that would be hard for a lot of people because you share your journey in pictures and in words. Why was it so important for you to be that honest with the audience?
it was so important to me because I actually, Holly, was trying to pay it forward because somebody was that vulnerable and honest with me. So as I mentioned, I was working at the time when I was diagnosed, and because I was having this diagnosis, I told my team at work. And it was very tearful and a very emotional meeting. But afterwards, there was a woman who was new in our office. And she pulled me aside and she whispered, she leaned in and said, "I've had a similar diagnosis and surgery. And you're going to be okay. And would you like to see what it looks like? Would you like to see my breasts?" And in that moment, as you can imagine, I was at work. I was trying to be professional. This woman was new, so I barely knew her. But of course, I said yes. And it was this incredible experience where, she vulnerably showed me, we went off to a locked bathroom and showed me her breast. And it gave me so much hope because she looked so healthy. She looked like really like she had never had this disease, like she had never had this surgery. And for me, standing on one side of it, for her to be on the other side and to see what it was like in the end, like I knew there was going to be some really tough, dark valleys, but then to see what my vision would be for after I was healed, it was an incredibly powerful and really life-changing experience because it was so vulnerable and it opened up so many doors for me. So after I was healed, I really felt this deep responsibility actually to do the same thing for other women. And Holly, I have to laugh. I'd get phone calls and emails all the time saying, "Oh, my neighbor was diagnosed. Can you talk to her?" Or my sister was diagnosed. And I am sharing my story with complete strangers, sharing photos with these strangers. And I thought, I'm on to something and I'd love to share it with more people. And so that's why I wrote the book. I felt a deep responsibility to pay it forward.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we think when we're going through something that it shows on us that it's going to be recognized. And I'm sure the woman in your office, you're looking at her going, I can't believe that happened to you because it's not written all over your face.
Yes. And that was the greatest part is that I was in such deep, like, fear and anxiety. And I know that she'd done that too. But now today, where she was 5 years out, she really represented what I wanted to get to on the other side. And so that was just such a gift.
A lot of women struggle, though, with what it's going to look like during treatment, after treatment. And you seem so confident now. What helped get you to this point? Because confidence looks really good on you.
Yeah. And I want to be honest, I wasn't this confident back then, right? Like I am really confident now. But what got me there was a lot of trust. I had to trust many physicians that, I was just meeting for the very first time. When you go to a doctor's office, sometimes you meet with them for 15 minutes and you're making big life decisions. So there was a lot of trust that I had to place in other people. But I think also at the same time, I had to trust myself, right? Trust that I was making the right decisions, trust that I was listening to my own intuition about, the choices I was making. And I had to trust the process. I had to trust that the physician was telling me, here's what it's going to be like. And I remember him telling me, and several months after the surgery, you still can go on a vacation that I had planned. And I was like, I can't even understand how you are predicting that. But I had to trust the process. That's what gave me a lot of confidence, was just leaning into trust and finding a support community. So like I said, I had this woman who, vulnerably shared with me at work, and she was really coaching me a lot of the way. And I would ask questions like, is this normal? If I would have something that felt not a little bit right.
Mm-hmm.
So having someone to say, this is normal, or saying, yeah, you get to trust yourself. That was like real game changers for me. And, to your part about, how was I confident? I did ask the physician. I remember saying, you're telling me all of these things that's going to happen to me. Do you have any pictures of like what you're talking about? And he didn't. And he said, there's a lot of women that just wouldn't want to share those things. And I thought, okay, well, can I be that person that eventually shares those pictures? So that's why I documented all of those moments throughout my journey, because I just wanted to have the tools to really be that support system for another woman someday.
And isn't it really the fear of the unknown sometimes that's the hardest part of all of it?
Yes, the fear of the unknown. I mean, in the absence of information, people always assume the worst, right?
Right.
And so it's really hard to Google these things without, seeing pictures or seeing things that you don't want to see. So having a trusted source, replacing fear with some kind of comfort, whether it's through a friend or through a trusted source or a photo or a physician. I mean, that's how you get through those fearful moments. And man, there's a lot of those in a breast cancer and a mastectomy journey.
Oh, I'm sure because you have to have a million questions going into this. And like you said, sometimes you're meeting these doctors for the first time and it is a very short relationship.
Yes, it's so short. And I remember, my doctor, he would say this all the time. You have to trust me. You have to trust me. And I kept thinking, I have just met you. And, and he was a very, very, very kind physician. I will sing his praises, but, you do have to really take some significant risks, and that could be scary.
Did you bring somebody with you when you would go on these doctor's visits?
Yes. Not only did I bring my husband, but I think one of the greatest things they offer in the healthcare system often is a nurse navigator. So I wouldn't necessarily bring her with me, but she would be the person that would coordinate all of the different visits and all of the different appointments that I had. So, my husband was a great resource because he would take notes, even though I was trying to take notes, but it's very hard when you're trying to listen and sort of write things down. So my husband went to all of my appointments, but I really relied on the nurse navigator too, to also help fill in the gaps and guide those questions in between.
I've never heard of a nurse navigator before. Is that something that was just offered to you, or like did you have to ask? Because that sounds like an incredible resource.
Oh my gosh, it was offered to me, and it was such an incredible resource. And I imagine she was like air traffic control, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it literally would say, you have an appointment with this physician, and then you have an appointment with this surgeon, and then I've made you an appointment, to follow up, or here I'm going to sit with you and explain to you in more detail what the doctor just said because he didn't have time to really walk you through it. The nurse navigator, if you don't have one, I would highly recommend you ask for one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because just having your husband provides one source of companionship and support during that time, but you need that more practical sort of person that could come in and help you get to where you need to be.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's funny. I did carry, a notebook around with me, and I would write notes that I would take during a meeting or during an appointment. And then,
Hmm.
you'd look at it afterwards and it would look just like, garbage. Like it would barely make sense. Right. But then my husband would be the one taking more thorough notes. And so it was really just nice to have somebody else. So if you don't have a husband, bring a friend, bring a partner, bring someone who can really lean in there and be that support, because you're going to be feeling all sorts of emotions that cloud your mind.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. You call yourself, and I found that this was a really interesting term, but a cancer orphan.
Yeah.
Is it okay if we talk about that a little bit? Because
Like,
on this podcast, I've talked to many women about our relationships with our moms, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good, but they really do shape who we are. And in your instance, your relationship and your mom's experiences really did shape you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
oh, she shaped so many things in my life, Holly. She was a quiet leader, but a very strong woman. And, her experiences, gosh, I was in my 20s when she was diagnosed.
Mhm.
And I will say that in the beginning, I didn't necessarily know how serious it was, right? I was in my 20s and I was trying to live my best life and, go on dates and try and build my career. When she was first diagnosed, she's like, I've got this. You don't have to worry about me. And I think she was trying to protect me, right? But when she relapsed the first time, that's when I woke up to like, okay, this isn't just, a one and done anymore. And so I really leaned in to her after she relapsed that first time. And I'll never forget, there was one time every time she would get chemotherapy, she'd need to be in the hospital for at least two nights. And I stayed there for the day, and just so concerned about her that I was like, I'm not leaving, Mom. She was like, no, no, no. Visiting hours is over at 10, right? And I was like, that's cute, but I'm not leaving. And sure enough, like I just climbed into that twin bed with her in the hospital, and the nurses came in and said, it's past visiting hours. I said, that's great. I'm going to spend the night. And they were like, okay, right? Because I think, with cancer in particular and with a mother-daughter relationship, those kinds of rules can get bent a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
those times that I spent and so that became a tradition. So the times I spent with her in the hospital became the most sacred time for a mother and a daughter to be together. And not just to be, obviously overseeing her care, but just to have those quiet moments, after all the hubbub of a day goes by, to be together and just to connect and, to really deepen our relationship as mother daughter, but as friends as well. And I have some beautiful memories, hard memories, but beautiful memories of that time together. And, you know, when she passed away, I was there alone with her, even though my brother and my father, they'd been there during the day, but I got the chance to really say goodbye to her and really shepherd her out of this life into the next life. And it changed me as a person. It really did, Holly. And I think, some of the things that we've been talking about of how can I be so vulnerable or authentic probably stems from that. Just knowing, I mean, I literally held her hand as she took her last breath. And so it just shows you that what's really important in life is really supporting each other and being there for each other, and nothing else matters.
Yeah, all that other stuff, all those silly arguments we tend to have, or the hurts that we hold on to, in the end, you just want, that moment with your mom.
Yeah, exactly. And she's not perfect. I'm not perfect. But I think we did have a perfect relationship as a mother daughter.
You talked a little bit about the treatments that she went through and maybe how you feel strongly about that now.
I
Um,
do.
did you see that a lot had changed since your mom was diagnosed and what she was offered to maybe the thing kind of treatments that you were offered?
Yeah. Towards the end of her life, she was in the hospital one evening, and it was a late night shift, and a young physician came in. Probably he drew the short straw and had to do the overnight shift. But at that point, my mom's diagnosis, her medical file was huge, right? It was like really thick. It was almost like, Lord of the Rings, kind of like a very big novel,
Oh, I'm sure.
and, he came in and he was flipping through it and just sort of, reflecting. And he looked up and he said, "This is interesting." And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, if your mother had had a mastectomy from the start of her diagnosis, you might not be in this position today." And it's that comment, and I think he was trying to be helpful, and it stung so badly because he was referring to a decision we had made at the very start of her journey, right?
Yes.
Years and years ago, where at the start she had to choose between having a double mastectomy, which is, removal of your breasts, or just having a lumpectomy, which is where they just take out the small tumor and lump in the breasts. Um, she chose that lumpectomy because it's, easier to do. It's not as invasive. It's not as challenging. And you get to keep your body shape and things like that. But that's what happened. She relapsed in the exact same spot where that lumpectomy was done. So I remember that moment and that comment from that physician and thinking, if I am ever diagnosed, I will make a different decision.
Hmm.
And, it haunted me. It haunted me for years after she passed away. But even when I was fearing my own breast cancer diagnosis. So when I was diagnosed, uh, you know, I was faced with that choice again. I mean, literally the physician, it was like deja vu. He sat with me and he said, "You're going to have to choose. Do you want to have a lumpectomy or do you want to have this double mastectomy?" And he said, "The double mastectomy is going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be really painful." And I said, "I'll take it." And I think he was taken off guard. He said, "You might want to think about this. You might want to spend more time." I might have been the world's fastest decider in this big life decision, um, because I just didn't want to have that fear of a relapse. And I wanted to remove any possibility of having the same journey as my mother. And so I was really firm about that decision, even though it was still scary and I still didn't want to do it, but I knew I had to face it.
Well, you had already been making that decision for years.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
you had
yeah.
put yourself in that situation knowing
Yeah.
that could have been a possibility.
Yeah. And originally when my mother made that decision years ago, we were given these like statistics, right? Like,
Mhm.
if she, she'll be fine and she'll have a 95% chance of living if, in the course of action that she took. And like, I was like, what about that 5%, right? I wanted to remove any doubt that I
Mhm.
was making the right decision.
Part of what I really like about the book is that you wrote it also for the caregivers, because they play such an important role, I think, in people's lives. And there are so many women that I've talked to recently who find themselves in the role of a caregiver, whether it's, for aging parents or helping a friend through an illness. What advice would you give them when they're playing those roles of being a caregiver, but also not forgetting to care for themselves?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am so grateful that many people, supported not just me in my journey, but my husband. My husband was the primary caregiver. And, the hardest part of being a caregiver is not only having to make sacrifices, but also having to admit that you need help. It's really hard to admit you need help as a caregiver, right? As a patient, you kind of have to admit that you need help. But as a caregiver, that's my advice, is making sure that you take people up on those offers, right? And what I mean by that is people offered to make meals. And my husband's a beautiful, amazing cook, but he still said yes, right? And, and people offered to do laundry for us. There was a neighbor who came by and cut the grass for us. Somebody came by and weeded, right? Like our, flower beds. And he had to say yes to all of those things, even though he's fully capable. And I wasn't capable, but I wanted to be capable of all those things. But you have to accept help and be okay asking for help. And that's my biggest, sort of encouragement for a caregiver is be okay asking for help and be okay receiving it. And just know someday you can pay it forward. And
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think that the biggest thing you could do for someone who finds themselves in whatever type of role in which they need some help is just to give of your time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And think about, people offered to babysit for us. I mean, these were some really specific asks based on our family life situation at the
Mhm.
time. So again, if you are a friend and you know someone who's a caregiver, my other suggestion is be specific in your asks, right? Say, and I give them either or, like, can I babysit for you or can I bring you a meal? Right? Because then that
Mhm.
person really kind of, I'm going to say, is forced to accept one of the two, but it really, it also clarifies kind of what opportunities and what gifts that you can offer them.
And I read a little bit about that in the book where you sent out an email to everyone
Yeah.
in advance of what you were going to go through. And I thought that was such a good idea because people do want to help. And those that are around us, that are close to us, they do want to be a part of that journey in some way. And I thought that was just really such a great way of handling it.
Yeah. I'll give special credit to one of my best girlfriends suggested I do that. She's like a project manager and she was on it. She was like, she actually offered, she's like, let me give you the gift of this communication tool. And she was like, here's what you need. And so I felt this incredible responsibility to pay it forward for the many gifts that I was given.
There's also a line in the book where you talk about removing the fear as well as the cancer.
Yes.
That part really stuck with me. What helped you with the fear?
Oh, yeah. I mean, sort of not to get in the weeds too much about a breast cancer diagnosis, but when I talk about lumpectomy, right, versus a mastectomy, it's a very common choice that women are faced with when they're diagnosed with breast cancer, depending on when you're diagnosed and kind of the
Mhm.
severity of the diagnosis. But it's very common to have that choice. Obviously, a lumpectomy it's easier, right, in terms of again recovery and all of the other things. Um, But what I always want to coach women on is the fear that comes back by just not taking such an aggressive approach as a mastectomy, right? With a lumpectomy, you still have to go through mammograms the rest of your life. And you know what is so scary is having a mammogram after you've had breast cancer, right? Because
I
you're
could only imagine.
always worried. You're
Hmm.
always worried. Your number one fear is going to be a relapse. That's what you're always worried about. And that constant fear, um, I have a term for it. It's called scanxiety, right? It's the anxiety you feel leading up to an exam or a scan, and it's the anxiety you feel afterwards while you're waiting for the results. That's a
Hmm.
pretty significant period of time to be sitting in that fear and anxiety. And you know what fear and anxiety does to your body. It sits in your body and it doesn't do good things. Um, so, choosing a mastectomy is obviously the more aggressive approach, and it's more invasive in terms of surgery, and it's a longer recovery and all of the things. But the fear that I don't have that fear. I don't have that fear
Hmm.
of a relapse anymore. I can't get breast cancer. I can't relapse because I don't have breasts, right? It's like if you had cancer in your arm and you cut off your arm, you can't relapse in your arm. Uh,
Right, right.
it's like you just can't. So, I mean, I will say obviously there's always a small chance, but you're really removing a lot of the fear. And I know lots of women who are so grateful to just not have to worry about the fear as much as a fear of a relapse and being specific in that, as much as they have to overcome some of the surgical challenges.
Well, because that fear would come up how often? Like if you decided to only have a lumpectomy.
Oh, every day. I actually, I have a good friend who just chose the lumpectomy, and I love her to death. And she made the choice that was right for her at the time. But every once in a while, she'd say to me, I had this pain in my breast and I freaked out. And so I had to go to the doctor. And it's constant, the fear that she has. And I really feel for her on that because
Yeah,
it's always in the back of her mind. Yeah.
yeah, that would really, I don't know how you could get through a day where it wouldn't creep up somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. And even myself, and I write about this in the book, I still sought mental health therapy because, I still had lots of fear. If I had a pain in my abdomen, I would think, oh my gosh, maybe I have stomach cancer. Or I had to really work through those fears and mentally get past that. It becomes a mental game, no matter what. And it's the degree to which you want to sort of manage through some of those fears.
When you started going through this, did doctors suggest maybe to look into some type of mental health therapy to go along with the treatment?
Yes. I will say my surgeon was so great. And he said, I'm prescribing all these things and I'm
Mhm.
prescribing it for mental health therapy. And I was like, I don't need that. I'm fine. And every time I'd go for a checkup, he would sort of push the paper in front of me and say, I really think you should get some mental health therapy. And by about the third or fourth time, I was like, you know what? I trust you because we'd been building
Yeah.
this relationship. And also I thought it can't hurt. And I'll tell you, Holly, the hardest part of mental health therapy is just making that first phone call, just booking the appointment. That was the hardest part. Once you get there, you realize it is totally okay to open up. It is totally safe to talk to someone and is so beneficial. And I laugh at myself because the scariest part was literally picking up the phone and pushing the numbers and booking the appointment. After that, it was only just generous listening, extreme compassion, and thoughtful healing through talking with
Yeah.
a really a talented therapist.
Yeah, well, because you expect the physical parts of it, the surgeries and the different things that you have to go through, but we sometimes neglect that there is going to be an emotional part of that.
Yeah, I always encourage women to really lean into. It's really hard when you're going through the physical part because you're just dealing with so many appointments.
Yeah.
But once the dust settles, I really do recommend it, and I really benefited greatly from that.
You spend a lot of time advocating and being there for other people, and this seems like it's a really big part of your life. How do you make sure that you're not spreading yourself too thin? And what ways do you fill that cup up?
Oh, okay, Holly. Truth is, I am spreading myself too thin. Only I always joke. I feel like I have, 3 full-time jobs. I work full-time. I am a mom to 2 children, and then I have this passion project. But you know what? Honestly, conversations like this absolutely fill my cup. And you know what the biggest cup filler is? When
Hmm.
I hear from a woman who I don't know, like a complete stranger, who says that the book that I wrote helped her tremendously. And I've received many of those messages. And so I know that it means something to women. That is the biggest reason I do this, is because if I know it can make a difference, I'm willing to, go the extra mile for it.
I'm sure that you have met many fascinating people on this journey and that you have seen and heard stories of strength and resilience. What has this journey taught you about how strong we really can be for ourselves?
Oh, I think it is amazing when someone goes through a cancer diagnosis. And I've heard this comment often. Someone will say, I don't know how you got through it, or I don't know how you did it. And consistently, and I'll say this, and other women who've been through it, they say, well, I didn't have a choice, meaning like you kind of had to go through it. And so every woman that I've met, or every experience I've heard about, really people have found a way to dig deep into that pool of resilience in a way that they did not realize they had capacity to do. And sometimes it's harder for others, but I do believe women are so strong, stronger than we all realize. What is it? That's is a famous quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that I love, and it's a woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until she gets in hot water.
Oh,
And I love that, right? Because you don't know how strong you are until you're sort of with your back up against a wall and you're in hot water. And I've seen the power of women rise time and time again. And I've met some really incredible women with some really challenging stories
mhm.
that have risen from the ashes, I will say.
There was one little, is a very, very short quote in the book. Is it okay if I read
Yeah, of
it?
course.
You said when it's part of when your world turned upside down, and you said here, when I love myself, I move mountains.
Oh, yes.
And I just wanted to say, I just thought that that was so beautiful. And really, I think sometimes we forget to love ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's probably actually, Holly, thank you for noticing that. That's probably my favorite line in the book. And it's a mantra that I come back to every once in a while is when I love myself, I move mountains. And that is true. When you have the self-care that you need. And again, as women, as we talked about, sometimes we spread ourselves too thin. And sometimes we avoid the self-care that we need and the self-love too. But when you really love yourself, that's when magic happens. Yeah. When I love myself, I move mountains. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for reminding me of that one.
Oh, thank you for writing it. Every October, there's so much focus on breast cancer awareness, and we see the pink ribbons and the fundraisers and all of those things are important. But what happens after? Do you think there's still part of the conversation that we're missing out on?
Oh, yeah, always. Right. And I agree with you. I love October because it shines a light on it. And there are so many women I talk to that say, oh, gosh, I forgot to get my mammogram, but now I'm going to go do it. Right. Like that to me is worth all of the awareness building that comes with October. I think part of the conversation that we're missing is the one that I'm trying to elevate, which is this conversation about a lumpectomy versus a mastectomy, but more importantly about the fear piece, the one that you and I just talked about. Because when I'm usually coaching women, I will say I'm not a doctor and I will never recommend one treatment over the other. But when I start to talk about the long-term fear, women in a breast cancer diagnosis obviously are so short-term focused, right? It's like, I've got to decide what kind of surgery I have. I got to decide, what to do tomorrow. But sometimes they're not always thinking about what is life going to be like 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road.
Mhm.
Because of advancements in treatment, there is a really high life expectancy rate on breast cancer. But the fear piece is the one that I just think I really want to elevate a little bit more about how do we eliminate the fear by taking the harder choices at the start. Yeah.
Because, fear can occupy so much
Oh, much.
up here, so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
For women who are listening that are maybe in between, either they are at the beginning of this journey or they're not quite feeling like themselves yet, what do you want them to remember about how they're going to find their way forward?
Oh, I say this all the time. You are not alone. What I mean by that is at the start of a diagnosis, I do know a lot of women and even kind of into it who haven't yet found their people, haven't yet found their support system, or maybe haven't yet found another woman who's been in a similar journey. And it's very lonely, extremely lonely at the beginning. But you are not alone. And there are women and caregivers and people out there that want to support you. And I just encourage you, if you're feeling down, reach out and ask for help, ask for support. Whether it be, I've seen support groups online, whether you know somebody who, a friend of a friend who's been diagnosed, reach out to me. I'll connect with you. But you're not alone. That's what I keep saying is it may feel lonely at the beginning, but you are not alone.
So find that community, find that support group.
Yep. No matter what, no matter way. I mean, there's in-person groups. There's so many nonprofit organizations. That's their main purpose. I know lots that are, can do virtual peer mentoring. And it's just, there are an incredible amount of resources out there.
I really want to thank you for taking the time with me tonight and for putting your story out there and giving women a place to kind of rest their fears and find a place for all of what they're going through. Where can we find you and how do you encourage others to support this cause?
Yeah. Please come find me on my website, which is my full name, ericaneubertcampbell.com. And certainly I can provide you with that link. The book is also on Amazon. So you can search under the Mastectomy I Always Wanted. And, please reach out. There's a contact me on my website. I respond to all messages and I love hearing from other women.
I will vouch for that because you responded to me.
I do. I feel honored when someone reaches out. I really do.
Well, again, thank you for being here this evening, and I appreciate the time we spent together.
Yeah, same, Holly. And I'm really honored, and I hope we get to stay in touch.
Thank you for joining us on Real Wisdom. If you're inspired by stories like this and want to be part of a community that celebrates the wisdom of women, visit joinempart.com and become a part of our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for even more real wisdom. Until next time, keep embracing your story.